Grant Engel is the Insights and Analytics Manager for Southeastern Pennsylvania Transportation Authority, aka SEPTA, in Philadelphia. He works in the Office of Innovation to integrate business innovations into SEPTA culture with an emphasis on data as a business asset. Grant is a graduate of the Blaustein School of Planning and Public Policy at Rutgers University, where he received a Master's of City and Regional Planning with a concentration in transportation. His interest in transportation span public transit, parking policy, and pedestrian and bicycle facilities. In particular, he is passionate about the ease of access to transit, including fare structures, payment and information technologies, and wayfinding that lower the barrier to transit use. And finally, we have Laurence Lui. Laurence is a senior planner in transit service with the Toronto Transit Commission's Strategy and Customer Experience Group, leading a team that monitors and adjusts existing bus, streetcar, and subway services. Liaises with diverse stakeholders on various transit topics and assesses proposals for short and long-term transit changes in Toronto. Prior to joining the TTC, Laurence worked as a transportation planner for a consulting firm on multimodal transportation and transit projects across Canada. So welcome, panelists. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with everyone in the panel, and we'll jump right, before we jump into that, I did want to address MOGO's response to COVID-19 and just share a couple of things that we've done. So we, as a bike share system operated in Detroit, opted to stay open during the pandemic. We could stay open, but mainly we made that decision to provide transportation to folks who had no other options. And for some who may have been a little apprehensive about using other forms of mass transit during that time. But we did, so we stepped up our cleaning procedures at our stations and on the bikes. So every touch point was cleaned and sanitized every time our rebalancers or operations team went to one of our stations, which is at least daily. But we also cleaned every touch point on the station, including the kiosk screens, the credit card dip, the receipt dispenser, the handlebars, the seats on the bikes, the keypad on the dock, everything you could think of that people could touch, we cleaned on a regular basis, and we actually continue to do that. We also created signage that we put on all of our stations, including the 31 new ones in our expansion area, that are reminding people that they should also practice health and safety guidelines when riding a bike. So we suggested that people still continue to wear gloves, mask if they feel more comfortable with it, just so that they also are doing their part to stay safe on our transportation system. So it's certainly an interesting time to be here, to be operating a system, any kind of transportation system here in the age of COVID. So I'd like to go back to Kate Sylvester for her presentation. Are you ready, Kate?
I am ready. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, perfectly.
Great. Well, thank you. I'm really happy to be part of this panel tonight, part of this discussion, and thanks, Adriel, for the introduction and moderating. So as you said, I'm Kate Sylvester. I'm Director of Planning at the Maryland Transit Administration. MTA is the transit provider for Baltimore City. We have a large core bus system. We also have light rail, a metro subway system. We operate MARC train as our commuter rail, complementary paratransit, of course, and then we also are the direct recipient. We provide federal funds to all small transit agencies throughout the state of Maryland. That's my baby, on cue, of course. So 23 local transit systems throughout the state of Maryland. So we also help sort of facilitate and provide technical support to them. So I don't know about the rest of you, but like I remember so clearly like the last meeting I was in the office when it was like, oh, is this really happening? Is this really going to be, this is going to be a big deal? Okay. I remember like the last person's hand I shook and it was kind of like, oh yeah, I guess like we don't shake hands anymore, sorry. but it was just such a like huge, like head spinning thing that all of a sudden this has completely reshaped our world. And so again, I'm just happy to be part of the conversation as we're all adapting and trying to figure it out. So at MTA in mid-March, this all kind of, came about as it did everywhere. And our ridership dropped about 70% across our system. So just huge precipitous decline as, our governor and elected officials announced these sort of stay-at-home type of orders that were sequential. We immediately put in place all sorts of enhanced cleaning protocols. We suspended cash fare payment, rolled out additional safety protocols for our operations staff, PPE for operations staff. We also did things like, communication, frequently asked questions, like new sick leave. It was just like top to bottom. Stuff was just coming out so fast in those early stages as we were reacting to this. We did reduce some of our service as we saw ridership drop. And then we did a lot with just responding to the governor's orders. So MTA is a state agency, but even if we weren't, we're all guided by the governors in our state. So just as we learned things from the governor, finding new ways to get that information out to our riders and our staff as quickly as we could. I feel like that was the first 6 weeks or so of COVID, was just reacting. And now I think we're kind of moving into this recovery as things are starting to open back up. And now I think we're trying to transition to looking a little bit further ahead, continuing to look for new safety protocols, new ways to further enhance and make people both be safer and feel safer. Stepping up our service levels to sort of stay ahead of ridership coming back, making people feel comfortable. And really, we're just continuing to learn as we go. I think communication is number one. The thing, the successes that we've had have been because we've communicated well. The failures that we've had are because we haven't communicated well. So I think we're all trying to just get better at that and stay on top of that. And I think we're in this new world. Our whole agency, even more than normal, is ready to jump in and support our operations team. So we have a large management staff. My office does environmental planning and capital planning, and we're still doing all of that stuff. We're still moving forward with big initiatives that the agency hopes to be able to move forward with. But at the drop of a hat, we're all ready to jump in and support our ops team to make sure we're getting the best service on the street that we can. So I think I'll leave it there. I look forward to the Q&A and discussion. And again, thanks.
Cool, thank you so much. Next we have Simone Lowe.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah. Yes, perfect.
Okay, great. Sorry about the delay. Thank you so much for your patience.
No problem.
Okay, so I am Simone Lowe, and I am the General Manager for IntelliRide. IntelliRide is a division of TransDev. I am responsible for the paratransit service here in the Metro Detroit area. We travel 3/4 of a mile beyond the last fixed bus route in Detroit. Pre-COVID, we were responsible for 1,500 to 1,800 trips per day. Since the pandemic has affected our world, our ridership has decreased tremendously by more than 65%. In light of the pandemic, we have provided transportation to COVID-19 testing sites with a partnership from the city of Detroit. We're responsible for picking residents up who have symptoms or who may not have symptoms. As long as they have a prescription from a licensed physician stating that they can be tested, we arrange transportation to take them to and from the testing site. We received 10 brand new 2020 Honda Odyssey vehicles that were donated by the American Honda Motor Company, which was a huge success. These vehicles have been modified to accommodate COVID-related trips. There is a airtight plexiglass partition that separates the driver from the passenger. to honor the CDC guidelines and the social distancing distance practices. With these trips, once we pick the resident up from home, we take them to the testing site. These are all single mission trips, so no one is in the vehicle besides the driver and the passenger. Once the passenger is picked up and taken to the testing site, the test is administered while they're in the vehicle. After they are tested, the driver then takes them back home, and they obviously disembark the vehicle, and then the driver goes to one of the designated testing sites, cleaning sites, to get the vehicle disinfected and sanitized. This happens after each trip to make sure that there is no cross-contamination, no one catches the virus because of someone else's habits. So we just want to make sure that we're practicing every single guideline and crossing every T and dotting every I to make sure everyone stays safe. We also have a program that we partner with the Salvation Army. And for those individuals who don't have permanent housing, we transport them from one testing site to a shelter or to a family member's home, to a quarantine site. Of course, we supply PPE equipment for or supplies to those people who are getting into the vehicle. So there are gloves, there are masks, there are plastic bags to deposit the fares inside of, to make sure that no one is picking up any unnecessary virus characteristics, if you will, to transmit to someone else. So this is a very, very beneficial program. I'm really happy to be a part of, contributing something back to the city in light of the pandemic. It's very unfortunate that we are experiencing this. I'm definitely honored to be a part of the panel to discuss what we do in Detroit. And I appreciate everyone here for tuning in. I didn't realize it would be such a great turnout, but thank you very much, Mickey, for the invitation. And thank you for my fellow panelists for allowing me to be here.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Simone. We're happy to have you here. And I can't wait for the moderated Q&A, because I will definitely be asking you some Detroit-specific questions. But next up, we have Grant Engel. Grant, would you like to give us your presentation?
Sure. Thanks, Adriel.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm Grant Engel. I'm the Insights and Analytics Manager in the Office of Innovation at SEPTA. So I'll just tell you a brief overview, like Kate did, of what my transit agency is, and then tell you a little bit about what I do, and then our COVID response. So SEPTA is the transit agency for southeastern Pennsylvania, which is 5 counties in the Philadelphia region. So we carry about 1 million people every day across many different modes, including like commuter rail, regional rail, bus, trolley, trackless trolley, which in other parts of the country is called trolley bus, trolleys, high-speed trolley, and 2 subway lines. So across all those modes, we've seen a significant decline, which is no surprise. I think it's about 70% at least on our transit side, and upwards of 90+% on our commuter lines, which are predominantly bringing people in from the suburban counties into Center City. And a lot of those, I'm sure we'll get into the discussions about different kinds of jobs, but a lot of those jobs are able to be done remotely via telework, and they predominantly are commute work trips as opposed to transit trips, which might be all different sorts of travel purposes. So SEPTA also has 9,500 employees, and we're always cognizant of their health and their safety. Within SEPTA's been around since 1965, but I'm in the Office of Innovation, which has only been around for 4 years. So we have a lot to live up to. We try to encourage and try to introduce new business ideas into the authority and change the corporate culture. And in particular, I'm one of 3 managers that's like topic specific managers. We have one who does sustainability, environmental and social sustainability. We have another manager who does business process improvement, and I'm the data person. So that's mostly key performance indicators and the kind of like corporate level of performance tracking, but it's also more and more, it's about these ad hoc analyses of large data. And what we've learned is that we need to be really nimble, especially in a time like this, to look at the information as it comes in and to try to make nuanced, intelligent decisions, but to do it quickly. So SEPTA has responded, without getting too much into the Q&A, but to echo what Kate has talked about, SEPTA has done a lot in the short term and is starting to build its roadmap for the next few months. One of the fastest things that we did was all of the office workers, including myself, March 16th, we were out of the building and haven't been back since. There are still a few engineers and contractors and others who are going back into the building, but for the most part, we vacated. We're doing telework, which basically 99% of us have never done before while working at SEPTA. And immediately, all these different kinds of communication protocols were created. Senior leadership started to have a conference called Twice Daily, which just ended recently. So for 2 months, they basically had these response task force meetings twice daily. And then we put in lots of different safety and sanitation protocols for our customers and our employees, including cleaning vehicles twice daily. We also have these security shields, which are mostly for the operator's safety, but they also come in handy quite nicely as shields that kind of enforce distance between the operator and customers. And we've only been using vehicles that have those, or for trolleys, trying to install them as quickly as possible. We did take down our service quite a lot. We reduced it significantly. And since May 18th on the transit side, which is everything that's not commuter rail, it's back up to normal. And for a time there, for about a month or more, we were not collecting any fares of any kind. Out of the abundance of caution, we were asking customers to board only at the rear of the vehicle and then and exit only at the rear of the vehicle. That has since changed. And now we're trying to do a circulation. And I'm sure I'll get a little bit more into this in the Q&A, but we've also been trying to work through some scenario planning about different possibilities of what could happen with the economy and with people's their own behavior and with the outcome of the pandemic or the continued unveiling of the pandemic. So I'll get to that, I'm sure, but that is kind of, we've been thinking about long-term and short-term. But what I'll say as kind of a teaser is to say that what I've seen in the Office of Innovation is many things that we got the cold shoulder and many things that we got said where the response was no. Suddenly the floodgates have opened and there's a lot more leadership that's up to saying yes to new ideas and to things that have been sitting on the back burner for months or years. And I think there's a lot more openness to rapidly evolving what we do, what our culture is, our employee culture, and how we serve our customers. And I would just want to say that I think I'm as eager as the attendees to hear what my fellow panelists have to say. Very, very interested.
Right. So thank you so much, Grant. And yeah, just for anyone watching, quite a few of the things that Grant and Kate touched on, we will actually have specific questions that we'll ask them later on. So if you feel like hearing some people expound on what they said, they probably will in just a few minutes. But right now, we're going to hand it over to Laurence Lui. Can you jump right in?
Sure. Thank you. And yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to hear some of the other, like I want to hear from Grant, what are these floodgates and have opened and what have you been able to move forward, because we're trying to do the same thing. Yeah, but basically that's a higher proportion was the color there. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
For sure. And then this map was produced soon after the beginning of the pandemic, where we really needed to hone into the priority routes we really need to protect, and then identifying key things like hospitals, grocery stores, pharmacies. So we know these are the routes that we need to make sure that we protect the service for. And very much so, we were focusing on those neighborhood improvement areas, as well as in pink, there are a lot of the employment areas that served people who employment uses that were more essential work, like our food processing plants and things like that that are still in the city. So we did a lot of, from a planning perspective, it's been quite interesting how quickly the decisions were made, and how quickly we had to shift from and doing things in a very different way than we would have done before. So we're starting to look into the fall now, and you know, right now we're just passing step 2, where in Toronto we were probably the slowest to reopen city in North America. We were just announced that starting tomorrow that food services in terms of patios are allowed to open, but still no dine-in restaurants. You know, malls are just going to start reopening after tomorrow. So we are probably the slowest to reopen city, but now we're starting to see some of that ridership return, and we're preparing for the fall. We've identified, because of trying to make it more comfortable for people coming back to transit, we said once we hit 50% of our former ridership, we have to provide 100% of our service. But the one important thing that we want to say, that we've been saying now, is just because we're at 100%, it doesn't mean we're going to do 100% the same way as we did before. So my team has been working to identify routes where we don't necessarily have to throw all the service back on, because they serve those markets that we know that won't come back to transit quick. So you'll see these blue routes here, and then you'll see the neighborhood improvement areas are still shown on this map, but there's going to be a number of routes that are outside of those areas that we know aren't going to be rushing back onto transit. We're going to keep their transit service levels lower so that we can reinvest those services on those key corridors and increase service on the ones where we know we're going to be serving populations that will need transit more often, especially to make it comfortable for people. So that's definitely some of the work that we're working on right now, my team, and I'm really, I'll look forward to answer any questions that you have on that. And then finally, we're looking now also towards future years, to 2021. What does it mean as we start using the words recover and reimagine our service? Because one part is recovery is to get customers back onto transit, but we know that it's not going to be in the same way as before the pandemic began. So how do we reimagine service? How do we do better service integration with things like bike share and with our cycling network? And then most importantly, how do we, what's happened over the past few months has really highlighted how important transit is to the most vulnerable in our city. And I really hope that we can start making sure our service meets those needs first and foremost. And then knowing if we do that, we're going to create a service that's also really attractive to get everybody else back onto the system as well. So that's my little speech there.
We'll thank all of you for your short intros and presentations. And so now we're going to get into some of the questions. And again, we're dealing in an unprecedented situation with wow. we're in a unprecedented situation with this global pandemic that's happening. I guess that's, it's a pandemic, so it is global, but just that, the last time that there was anything sort of like this or even remotely close to this was 100 years ago. So everyone is in new territory, and transit especially is having to adjust, while 100 years ago, there may have been forms of mass transit, i.e. probably trolleys, trains, but there certainly weren't things like bike share. There certainly weren't things like buses and things like that. So it's all new territory for all of us. So these are just general questions, and any of you that want to answer these can just jump right in and do so. In an orderly fashion, obviously. And some of you have addressed in your presentation some of these questions, but we'll try to get into a deeper dive with them. So the first thing I want to ask the panelists is really what is your organization or your agency doing in response to COVID-19, but I added an addendum to this, which is especially with it being an evolving situation that seems to change day to day. And so that's in light of the reopenings that are happening, with Toronto being slower behind the rest of us, but certainly the other cities are experiencing reopenings. Other parts of the country are experiencing reopenings. But there's also been a spike in cases in a lot of places that are reopening. We definitely seem to be in the midst of what they term the second wave of this. So what are your organizations doing, not just for COVID-19, I guess as it was, but this evolving situation that we find ourselves in? Any one of you can. This actually, yeah, we'll start with maybe with Simone. I mean, not to pick on you, but just that I happen to be a Detroiter, so I'm really interested in, and I see the news and the updates from some of our other transit partners here in the city. So just wanted to know, like, what, you know, we're evolving, and we happen to just be in a state that is one of two in the country that is noted for potentially having contained COVID-19, but we also are seeing a lot of non-safe things happening, right? So why don't you start?
Okay, thank you. As I mentioned earlier, there are vehicles that we're using as far as with the glass, the plexiglass partitions. That is one of the main things that we're doing to prevent the spread of the COVID-19 virus. We've also reduced our multi-loading. So whatever the seating capacity of the vehicle is, we have less than 30% ridership on the vehicle at a time. We don't want to expose too many people on a vehicle, even with the plexiglass partition. So we're practicing that. We provide masks for our paratransit service, our New Freedom service, for anyone traveling. We encourage you to have your own PPE gear. However, if you don't have it, we supply that. There's sanitizer in the vehicle. We are cleaning the touch points on a daily basis, well, multiple times a day, of course. I wouldn't say after each trip, but multiple times a day. There is a major cleaning in the morning, and then when the vehicle comes back into the barn. And then periodically throughout the day, the drivers are responsible for the sanitation of the vehicle. So I would say the main things, those vehicles that do not have any plexiglass partitions, those are the ones that we have removed from service, and we're looking to get the plexiglass installed into those vehicles, and we're just operating on those that we currently have that divider for.
Okay, cool. Anyone else want to answer that? Kate, I know you kind of went over this, but did you have anything else to add with what you said before?
Yeah, so I guess something, you know, in addition to the sort of rear boarding and enhanced cleaning and, you know, some of that stuff that, not to take it lightly, it's a big effort to get all that stuff up and running and to keep up with it on a day-to-day basis. But something that we're doing is, I think it's just the back and forth, the communication between the employers, some of the major employers of essential workers in our region, talking with the hospital network here. We have a huge hospital system in Baltimore, and some of the distribution centers and things like that. Like, they were very quick to call us and say, like, hey, we need you to keep running transit service during that. So talking to them in more detail than we typically do about how to serve their workers. And then also talking much more with our union, both to make sure that our operators know that they're valued and that we're doing everything we can to protect them, and doing things like we happen to have a former nurse on staff, and having that person go out and do town halls at our divisions just to answer questions, put out FAQs, put out, you know, PPE and thank you notes and that kind of stuff, but just, you know, reassuring and doing the things we need to do to get our operations staff and maintenance staff as well. They're providing the service, know that they're in a safe workplace, yeah, just recognizing their contribution as frontline workers has been a really important piece of keeping the service out on the street for us.
Cool. Grant or Louis? I'm sorry, Grant or Laurence?
I'll echo what what Kate was saying about working with employers, I think that has been like a really important part, is to understand that back and forth about where the demand is coming from, and working with them to also to stagger work times if possible, depending on the employment type, depending on the organization, to distribute the ridership and try to flatten the peak a little bit to make those times when it might be most peaked a little flatter. We've changed our service quite a lot. I think the biggest, the two big for SEPTA is communication. So communicating with customers, and so as we adapt, we're communicating with them. That has not always been SEPTA's strong suit, but it's kind of amazing to see when all hands are on deck what happens, and the amount of communication that goes out via all the social media accounts. Our website is quite it's in need of replacement, I'll say that, and that is one of the longer term things. But even so, we put together a microsite that has all this information about COVID, what we expect of customers, what we're going to be doing, or what we are doing. And that includes our reopening guide. So we've been watching very carefully what the governor of Pennsylvania does and what his guidance is, and then reacting to that and providing like a detailed response guide to say, under, and in Pennsylvania, it's the colored phases from red, yellow, green, and then blue beyond COVID. So under each of those phases, what will we be doing? What are the services that are available? What kind of social distancing is in place per, and certainly that's like a per vehicle type problem to solve. That has been really positive, and there's been, I think, just a lot of recognition that the people who are traveling are essential workers, and that we need to be very, conscious that their travel is mandatory in a sense. Their jobs are mandatory, and their travel to them is mandatory because they can't be done over telework. The other thing, there was one other thing that Kate mentioned that I thought was really good, but I can't remember it. So I'll just say, it's mostly been an all hands on deck story at SEPTA, which we're normally really good at. This is a really weird time, especially as we continue to evolve our response, where the business as usual and the kind of emergency response that we have to, emergency mobilization of our employees to respond to things like snowstorms or massive street closures and stuff like that that accompany large scale events. We're starting to see a kind of blending of the two of them, where we're taking that emphasis and that coordination and that mobilization that we do during these typically like short bursts, and started to apply that to our day to day. I think since I think about and talk about culture a lot, I would say that our business as usual expected things to be steady to a fault, and now we're learning very, very much because of this, how much we need to build in adaptation as part of our day-to-day business. So I've seen that a lot, and that's only possible with really good internal communication and really good external communication of what customers can expect from us and what we can expect from customers. Oh, and I remember the other thing that we're doing that is what Kate and Laurence also mentioned, that's really important for people to understand, that this was a decision, and I think all three transit agencies made the right decision, is we put out our full service a month ago. So we've been at full service for more than a month on the transit side, not the regional rail side. And that was unwarranted by demand, but it was warranted by social distancing. So we're trying to create as much physical distance for our customers as possible. And that comes with, a financial calculus that you're making and how much service to put out versus the revenue collected. But it is the right decision to make.
Right. Right. So Lawrence, I feel like you answered this question sort of already with your presentation. So I am going to go ahead and skip to the next one because we do want to leave time for a couple other things that are coming up, including a poll and the audience questions. But with this, listening to what you all have been saying, I have a question that, to ask you guys, and it sort of relates to what you were just talking about. And that's, with a lot of, having to run full services or even sometimes limited service with social distancing, there are examples of people who just could not get on a bus because of social distancing measures and allowing space for the drivers, so sometimes half a bus is cut off, who's bearing the cost for this? Who, with systems not able to actually function in the way that they were supposed to. We all know that most transit systems don't make money anyway, right? It's a public good, right? It's a public service that's usually funded by the governments or some other governmental mechanism that's in place. So it's not like it's funding from riders, but now with that being diminished in this time, who's paying for this PPE, for this enhanced cleaning, for actually the salary of the driver, where is that money coming from, and how much of a deficit are we creating within the agency? Anyone?
So those of who follow the transit world, in Toronto, we are one of the highest fare box recoveries in North America, and that's largely because our government subsidy levels have traditionally been very low, but also because our service has always been very reliant on very frequent corridors and require people to walk a little bit, which is actually to our advantage when you're talking about like having to have people wait for their next vehicle. It's having the frequent corridor system really works when people might have to wait for their next bus because the first one they're not comfortable boarding. So there's another one for Jarrett Walker to add to his list of reasons why to do this. But in terms of how to pay for everything, that's definitely it's always been on the back of our mind. Like, we're always concerned about what's going to happen if we are suddenly told that our subsidy is going to get cut. How are we going to start having those conversations of where to prioritize that service? Inevitably, that conversation is going to come because I don't know. Right now, we're getting a lot of good support in terms of paying for these things, and where the money comes from is just like, I guess, for everything else. Governments everywhere are going to be in major deficits moving forward. But I guess we just have to make the case of why we need to invest, as Grant mentioned, the 100% of service when we don't have the ridership back yet.
Right. Kate?
Yeah, I'll add a little bit from our perspective in Baltimore. We are benefiting from the CARES Act right now. So the Federal CARES Act provided quite a bit of money for transit operators. That's sort of helping us fill the hole right now. We're working really closely with FTA to actually get those dollars in the door. But I feel like right now that's helping a lot of transit operators pay for all these additional costs or cover the lost revenue as well. But I don't know how unique this is to Baltimore, but our fare revenue is almost non-existent right now. So our fare revenue is way down. But that's a really small portion of our budget overall, and a lot of our budget, like the majority of our budget, comes from our state transportation trust fund. So the impacts to all modes of transportation is driving the budget challenge that we're going to face. So like the fact that gas tax revenues are down, and people aren't buying cars, commercial tax revenues, and even airport fees, all that stuff like drives the budget for transit in Maryland. So it's already there's already been some public discussion of what that hole is shaping up to be, and so we're watching the recovery really quickly as we're seeing like roadway traffic volumes come back faster than transit volumes. That actually helps our budget, strangely. But it's definitely going to be challenging as we're all sort of facing this long recovery road. And so I don't know, my fingers are crossed that there's another federal bill that helps fill these holes so that we can provide the service that as a couple of the panelists have said, like it's the right thing to do. We need to do it, and we're going to do it as long as we can, but we're going to need some influx of funding soon to keep up with it.
Right.
So one piece I actually want to add there, Kate, because you reminded me, one of the other things that we're trying to take advantage of right now, because I think traffic levels are lower, is we're hoping that we can make the case that building more bus lanes is a way for us to actually deliver the same capacity that we do today for less money. And then as a result, we'd be more efficient. And that's definitely, we were really lucky to have a board member who moved to accelerate our bus plan that was in our 5-year service plan, potentially to get some lanes up and running by as soon as this fall. I know New York City, for example, has put in quite a bit, but I think this is an opportunity for us as transit professionals, as transit leaders, to make that case that there is a financial case for us to get priority.
Right. Right. I have to jump in here and say that, to answer my own question, that I think one of the anomalies, I think that perhaps it's an anomaly or not, is actually in the bike share and scooter world, right? Which is, I know that MOGO has seen an actually increase in revenue during COVID-19. It was, not expected. We actually did for 2 months, we offered a free monthly pass for anyone, and that was to help. That was during the height of the shutdown, and we had high utilization rates of that, but we thought for sure that things would go down a bit, and they haven't. They've actually been increasing. So I think that some transportation systems are definitely going to see an uptick in bike share. Has been, I think, generally across the board. I know Toronto, you just had a major expansion of your bike share system. You guys almost doubled your size. Almost, maybe is it close to it? But so I think that I think that the idea, right, is that people are gonna maybe opt to do other things versus some things, and I feel like it's an interesting thing to watch. I want to ask. I'm definitely going to get into what you guys think the long-term impact of this will be, but I do want to specifically, especially since Mickey talked about the Black Lives Matter movement that's happening, and that race seems to be the underlying quite a few things today, if not everything. And I just want to ask the panelists, with Black communities being disproportionately affected by COVID-19. What are some of the things, if anything, that your specific agencies or organizations have done to sort of mitigate the impact of that disproportionate effect or impact? And let's start with Grant.
Okay, thanks. Had to remember to unmute. Okay, so I think this is a really important question for this moment, and this is a interesting moment in history when these two topics, the pandemic and racial justice, cannot be disentangled. So in Philadelphia is a majority minority city, so people of color are the majority all told, and for our service that we offer, looking at the data that I pulled together, so 48% of our customers identify as African American or Black, 43% identify as white. So the majority of our service is not white. And just to throw in there for what I think is also a very important statistic, for SEPTA, 9 out of 10 SEPTA customers are women. Just thought that's important to throw in there too.
Thank you.
So we think of our services and transit as an essential infrastructure, an essential service for the city, not only because of the density of the city, but because of the makeup of the city demographically. I'll say it, you know, Philly is also sometimes referred to as the poorest major city in America. And that's true.
Oh, sorry, I thought that Detroit had that title, but I'm glad that you can take it.
I suppose it depends on where the cutoff is for big or major or whatnot. But yeah, either way, it's important that the transit in those cities take this on full force. And so far, what I've been seeing internal to SEPTA is internal communications to our employees, and our employees are also a great deal of our employees are people of color, and a majority of the employees who work in the field, i.e., not in the offices, but people who are maintaining and operating our vehicles, are majority minority. And one of the conversations around this is internal communications that have honored the Black Lives Matter movement and honor racial justice as a topic that must be openly discussed within internal corporate culture. But in terms of COVID, it's about keeping people safe. So that's what we've been focusing on, and that's what has been a big topic of discussion, or that has been the main avenue for addressing this problem, has just been the matter of safety when it comes to public health safety. And so that's why I put a lot of emphasis on our employee safety as well. And we are keeping track of how many COVID-related deaths there are within the SEPTA population. Unfortunately, it's not zero. There have been a few, and putting together all of these, all the things that have been mentioned already about protective equipment, face mask, gaiters, cleaning supplies, hand sanitizers, what I mentioned before about having the operators be at a distance from customers, these sorts of things, emphasizing the health and well-being of our employees. This is not something that reaches our customers, but this next topic is also for our employees, which is a renewed emphasis on mental health as well, since a lot of the burden of mental health, especially when it comes to stress from racial prejudice, is burdened or is borne by people of color more than white Americans. And so there's been a strong emphasis within our internal culture on making people aware of those internal resources for mental health. And luckily, one of the things about mental health is that it's a resource that can be reached over telecommunications. So stronger emphasis on that, and on that as a benefit of being a SEPTA employee. The last thing I'll throw in there is for, like I said, with there being a disproportionate representation of people of color in lower economic rungs, one of the things that SEPTA has done in general is really rethinking the fare structure. Now, we probably haven't gone as far as we need to, not as far as the advocates wanted to, but one of the things that will be two things that will be happening this July is we will be getting rid of the first transfer fee. So the first transfer after the base fare is free. So turning what would be a $3.50 ride into a $3 ride into a $2.50 ride, because the base fare will be going up. The other thing is that will affect especially women that I mentioned before, because they tend to be caregivers, is that the children will go, children's free fare will go from 5 years old up to 12 years old. So up to 12 years old will ride for free. This puts us on parity with a lot of other agencies across North America, but we think it's another thing that has a immediate impact, immediate equity impact on families and on people who are more transit dependent and families who are more transit dependent. So yeah, I'm very anxious to hear what our other panelists have to say, but this is a incredibly important topic for right now. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. And so I really, you know, we'll get to everyone who wants to answer that, but I really want to hear from Simone. Like, what are we doing here in Detroit, which is definitely the largest predominantly African-American city in America. So with the impact here, which is one of the reasons why, you know, I mean, Detroit was hit especially hard by COVID-19, and with the sort of connections that they're trying to make between the African-American community and COVID-19, we, you know, it still is, but definitely during the height of it was pretty horrific here in the city of Detroit. I'm sure that Simone, like myself, know people personally who are no longer here with us. So I'd like to ask Detroit and Simone what you guys are doing.
Okay. As I mentioned earlier, we are making sure that everyone is informed and educated about the CDC guidelines. When a rider calls in, we want to make sure that that they have their PPE equipment, that they're practicing the social distancing. We too have eliminated the fare for riding to limit that contact with the driver. We just want everyone to be safe. Again, as I mentioned with the shelter trips, those individuals who don't have permanent housing are African American, and we want to be able to provide some type of quarantine site for them, some type of transportation, whether it's getting to a family member's home or going to a testing site and allowing them to know what resources are available. Some of our other states or our other entities are providing Meals on Wheels. We haven't incorporated that as right now, but that's something that we are also looking into. The state of Michigan was asking us to provide transportation for essential employees as well. So those are things that we are looking into and incorporating and that we're currently doing. It's definitely something that has a big impact on our transportation. So those are the things that we are currently doing though.
Right, gotcha. Adriel Laurence?
Yeah, I'll add a couple of things to the conversation. So I've talked a bit about our focus on communicating with our workforce and making sure we have a safe workplace. And our frontline workforce is also majority people of color. So that's one element that I think is important. The ways in which our transit system in Baltimore serves people of color and low-income people and vulnerable populations has been and continues to be an ongoing conversation in Baltimore. And it's not something that we're able to change overnight. You know, we do we're focusing on talking to employers, making sure people can get to work, providing the service, maintaining frequency, you know, doing the best that we can during the COVID pandemic for our customers. But I think that, you know, this, the combination of the COVID pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement, the moment that we're in, has made us all realize, I think, that there's a lot more that we need to do. And it's not just going to happen as part of the COVID recovery. Maybe it's because I'm a planner, but, you know, I think we're taking another look at everything that we're doing as an agency with kind of fresh eyes, and challenging ourselves to do more, to do better. You know, you know, I think we're having some good conversations also, like just trying to have staff talk about these things and like be open and feel comfortable sharing and making this a part of our workplace, I think is important. And just really putting it more front and center in all of the projects that we're doing is something that I will try to make sure we continue to do, as we're responding to this recovery. And I know a lot of offices throughout MTA are doing the same, because, I just think it's not something that we can address immediately in the moment. It's going to take a lot of ongoing work.
Right. And Laurence, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, and I think the one thing that is really coming out with what's happened over the past few months, it's really took away the blinders from the sense of we're a very busy, very successful transit system, but a lot of those successes hid basically the people who are most dependent on our network. And what the pandemic has created is it's taken those blinders off, and we're very clearly seeing the neighborhoods, the populations are so dependent on our service. And there's some good out of it that I'm hearing leadership actually talk about it and about like protecting that service, about making sure we're responding to the needs of those neighborhoods. Whereas up until the pandemic, we've always been talking about how do we deal with subway crowding, which is predominantly a very higher income white collar downtown Toronto office job type of commuter problem, but not necessarily dealing with I've always been one who's all about our off-peak service and trying to push how great our off-peak service is, because those are where it's the people who are most dependent on transit are the people who are lugging groceries on and off bus that need room. And that was always seen as more of an afterthought, and we're so focused on the commuter. So I just hope that this is an opportunity for us to shift our attention to the people who are most dependent on our service.
Cool. Well, thank you all. So just a quick housekeeping note. Obviously, we were supposed to end at 6:45. We are not. So I invite all of the attendees to roll with us, to stay with us. I've got just a couple more questions for our panelists, and then there'll be a break with the poll and everything, and then we would get to audience questions, which have been rolling in. So I'm excited to get to those for you folks too, but just I think this is a really interesting conversation and folks seem to be interested in it. So we're going to keep going on. Okay. And hope that the panelists can definitely stay around for this, right? All right. So yeah, it's very definitely something that is helpful with the conversations that we've been having around the world, actually, in terms of BLM and knowing that transit is a race issue as well. But stepping out of that just a little bit, just to say, so back to the the COVID scenario, just from an agency standpoint or your organization standpoint, I will combine these two questions and just say, what do you think the long-term impact this is going to be like, and what are your recovery plans over the next 12 to 18 months? And we could start with, I don't know. Anyone want to jump in on that one right off the bat? Grant, you're always good for
I was gonna say I'm talking too much. I want to hear from other people. I'll try to make mine short. So I think that, where do we see this going? To be blunt, I think we don't know, and we can't really make plans for longer than a couple of years at most. We're engaging in a few different scenario planning type things to try to understand the recovery, but that's really just through the end of our next fiscal year. So basically through July 2022 or July 2021. Yeah. So we're not planning that far ahead when it comes to that, or when it comes to trying to understand the different scenarios as they'll play out. So we had a consultant look at those three different trajectories, which is the economic trajectory. So what is the story of the economy in the US? 2, what is the story of the pandemic? How does it play out? What are we in the second wave? Is there a third wave? Is there a fourth wave? and then rider behavior, customer behavior. So how do people, how are they reacting to this new set of circumstances, and are they changing their behavior? We were engaged by a great team of students at Penn State, and they're doing like a summer project. And what we asked them to look at, using some interesting like statistical and machine learning techniques, was to look at telework and to give us like a sense of, is the telework that's been introduced by COVID, is that going to become, to what extent will that become a new normal and something that is factored into our like longer term projections of ridership? But I want to mention a couple things, including answering what Lawrence had asked. Longer term, there's like two longer term things that are happening. There's the things that are directly related to COVID, and then there are the what I called previously like the floodgates open. So what were the things that had been stuck for a long time that got unstuck because we're in this moment of emergency? So one of the things that got unstuck is we are going to be, this is maybe not quite as certain as the other ones, but we're going to be moving pretty swiftly to overhaul our website, which is quite old. It's not, it doesn't look that bad, but the problem is that it can't be updated very quickly. So we need to be more nimble. We need to be able to communicate with our customers more nimbly. The other one that is a really huge one is the deployment of automatic passenger counters. So we have APC sensors on about half of our buses, maybe a little bit less. And now there's been an agreement that we will be purchasing APCs for all of our vehicles, and pretty swiftly, pretty quickly. So, and why is that important? Why is that COVID related? Because APCs have the ability to produce real-time information about crowdedness of vehicles. And so we think that that is absolutely crucial, that customers be given real-time crowding information on a per vehicle basis, so they can make decisions about whether they want to board that vehicle or not. We're also making, like an emergency investment in real-time arrival prediction, and to give people as much information as possible, because even though we're back to a full schedule, there are still instances where our service, where there's missing trips, and we want people to be aware of when the vehicles will arrive, not just what the schedule says. And then there might be one or two more that I want to mention, but that's all that I'll get to right now. Those are the kind of things that just all of a sudden, COVID has just made these non-COVID related things relevant immediately, and then decisions get made. And that has, those are longer term things. Oh, also just the general idea that we're going to be doing a network redesign. Obviously, all sorts of things like that get a completely new shadow cast over them with COVID, and they get rethought immediately. But all of those things are still part of our plans going forward. They just some of them just get completely recast and given a new sense of urgency because of COVID.
Right. Simone, let's bounce to you. Long-term impact and recovery plans.
Okay, as far as our long-term impact, we will continue to obviously practice the masks and the PPE equipment. We want to make sure that everyone continues to stay safe. We won't incorporate the fare immediately. We'll keep that suspended. As far as right now, and keeping the vehicles sanitized, just making sure that everyone stays in compliance and stays safe, whether it be the driver, whether it be the passenger. We just want to make sure that once the pandemic is over, I'm not exactly sure when it's going to be over, that we're able to, sustain life, in a normal capacity.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Kate?
Hi. I have to go for a charging cord, so I didn't suddenly disappear.
You had the future of Baltimore in the background screen. So All right.
Hopefully, the person charged hands.
Right.
No, I mean, we don't. Well, I guess so. We plan to reintroduce service. We're still running some reduced service, so we're looking to step that up as we are sort of opening up and people are returning to work and other activities. So looking to increase service. I agree wholeheartedly with some of what the other panelists have said. And I like the term that adaptation is part of the new normal. I think we're adjusting to that. So, processes that have just kind of been the way that we operated for decades of, 3 times a year, our operators pick their schedule and then we run that schedule for however many months. And, even things we provide school service for city middle school and high school kids. And we have no idea what school's going to look like this year. So how do we pick that schedule? I think we're adjusting to, picking multiple options so that we have we're better prepared if and when there's some of these start-stop cycles, because that seems to be what everybody is anticipating. Mm-hmm. And, really relying on technology. We had already, we were moving towards a headway-based, system and communication with our riders and sort of real-time information. And I think that stuff just becomes even more important as we're dealing with operator absenteeism that we can't predict. And so, running our schedule, we're, obviously hoping to do as well as normal, pre-COVID, but just really having those real-time technology tools and that up-to-date information is just critically important now. So we're really relying on those types of things.
Awesome. Laurence?
So first, Kate, I think we'll probably want to connect at some point because I want to hear how headway-based operations working for you, because it's always been.
Not there. No, I don't
Okay.
but we've been trying.
Yeah, that's always been a challenge in Toronto, and that's definitely one of those things that I think is one of those things we need to look at more closely if we're going to be able to be responsive, right? So.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing we've learned is we need to have options and be flexible as much as we can. So. Part of our strategy over the past few months is, we did reduce our scheduled service, but that was to create this gigantic pool. We have about 150 buses a day that we're deploying on an as-needed basis by our transit control team, where we're seeing hotspots, where we're seeing service levels change on a day-to-day basis. And part of that reduction plan that I showed earlier with the routes that we're going to keep reduced was to maintain that pool through the fall, because we don't know what's going to happen with school. As a planner, it drives all of us crazy that, we can't make decisions because decisions aren't being made as inputs. So obviously everyone's a little frozen, but, we'll work with that going forward. Into the longer term, discussing that whole reimagine piece, we just finished a 5-year plan and had it approved in December of last year. We're gonna have to probably revisit that 5-year plan a little bit and see what things that we need to adjust. So definitely, I think we're gonna have, in light of everything, we're gonna have to have those conversations moving forward.
Gotcha. All right, so I have a final question. It's really just for Laurence, and then we're gonna go into, I think a poll or something. Mickey's gonna come back on, and then we're gonna get to audience questions. So I know you all are excited about that. But Laurence, I really loved your point about Toronto's agency's ability to convince stakeholders to invest more in transit. So what did this case for supporting transit look like? Do you know, not to put you.
Those weren't really I wasn't the one standing up in front of someone being like, hey, give us money. So I unfortunately wasn't in the room, but I think, once you saw the photos of people who were still on a bus at 5 o'clock in the morning trying to get to their job, it became one of those no-brainers of how can you not be supporting the people that are keeping, all of us fed, who are, delivering the services that we need on a day-to-day basis to keep us, sane. And I hope that, we don't lose that momentum moving forward in terms of, there are people that we critically always need to be supporting in our society.
Okay, gotcha. Maybe we can, that's something that as a group you all can talk about it at a later date, or you can come back to the group and figure out, like, what was that use case like. I know that last time I was in Toronto, which was a long time ago, I was one of those people waiting for the bus at 5 in the morning because I had raved till dawn. And it was not a good feeling waiting out there for for that long. But right now, I think I'm going to bring Mickey back on, who's got some fun things for us to do. So, Mickey, you ready?
Yes, I am. Thank you, everyone. That was great discussion. I really appreciate all that. For the attendees, we want to know more about you. We want to know where you're from. I've heard a lot of shout outs in this chat. So we'll pop some questions if you guys don't mind. First question is on its way up.
And Mickey, this is just for the attendees, right? Like I'm not voting. I can't seem to vote.
Yeah.
All right.
And we should be able to see responses soon.
Oh, Toronto's kind of killing it, huh?
All right. My end. Do we see your vote?
All right.
Shameless plug. I'm gonna go ahead and give a shout out to St. Louis, Missouri, my hometown. So St. Louis in here. All right. Now we're gonna go ahead and go into the questions that were submitted from the audience.
Perfect. There are a lot. So, Mickey, you want me to take that? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. From Brian Seal in Maryland, his question is, and any of the panelists who want to just jump in and answer these, that's you're totally open to do so. But his question is, in Maryland, we have cut off some of the bus to allow spacing for the drivers. However, this has caused crush loads for riders, I'm sorry. Since it seems this will continue, are there things that we can do moving forward to protect drivers while opening up the whole bus to riders again?
So in Toronto, we had plexiglass shields for our operators, and we've had that for quite a number of years, actually. So, we're a little ahead of the curve with that. But one thing that we are instituting starting July 2nd is mandatory face masks on board transit. And, that's from hearing from not just from within Toronto, but there's a lot of research across the world where a lot of customers have said that mandatory face protection is one of the things that would make them more comfortable to be back on transit. And that's partially because we are actually shifting our messaging over the next few months that, you will have to expect to be on fuller vehicles, because it's not realistic to be continuing to operate service that only has 10 people, 15 people aboard the bus. That's not how mass transit is set up to do, and it's not sustainable to continue. So I know a number of agencies are slowly shifting that message, especially with the good research coming out from much more transit dependent busy places like Japan and France, where there have been no evidence of community-based transmission on public transit, provided that adequate things like face protection and whatnot are on board vehicles. So that's part of our messaging going forward.
All right, cool. Did anyone else want to jump into that, or? Okay, so I'll move on to the next question. And this is from Matthew Popik. I hope I'm saying it right. But his question is, there's the general assumption that riders would not return quickly to transit services, and that everyone would choose to use some sort of form of single occupancy vehicle, whether maybe that's a bike, maybe that's a maybe that's a car, whatever the case may be. But the first part of that question is, do you panelists agree or disagree with this assumption? Because from their anecdotal evidence, some people are really looking forward to resuming transit ridership when they need to do so. So you guys agree with that? Like that general assumption is, and where is that, coming from? I mean, I know the ridership is down, but is there an assumption, I guess I should say, as to whether or not people are actually not going to return to transit? Kate?
I guess I'll my perception on it. I think it'll vary. I think that there are risk averse people who are sanitizing groceries and taking every precaution, and that's just like natural, right? There are some people who are super risk averse, and they're not going to put themselves in any situation where they perceive there to be some risk. And so there's going to be some folks who I think are really slow to come back to transit, and may shift modes away from transit. There are going to be some folks who weren't on transit before who find themselves unemployed, unfortunately, and become transit riders. And there are going to be a lot of folks in between who, prefer to ride transit, need to ride transit, maybe can take another mode here and there. And I think it depends on how good of a job we do at making them feel comfortable and safe, and like we're providing the service that they need. That'll determine whether they get back to their normal riding patterns or ride even more, or whether they try to find other options. So that's sort of a cop-out answer, but I guess, I think it's going to be a somewhat slow recovery, but I really do think that the way that we handle it will influence, how ridership returns.
Anyone else want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I think both panelists covered it pretty well, but from the scenario planning that we've done and from the projections that we have, we don't see, speaking for Philadelphia only, we don't see transit ridership returning to 100% of pre-COVID in the next, say, 3 years. We just don't see it coming back to that level. I think that's for a variety of reasons, which I probably won't be able to list all of them, but people will just change their habits, the possibility and prevalence of telework. And then what Kate just mentioned is economic downturn means there may be fewer people who simply have jobs to commute to, if that's a primary reason for them to travel on transit. So, which is very sad, but that is a possibility, is that there's just also less economic activity going on. That said, what Kate said is also really important, that ridership doesn't come back irrespective of what transit does. So there's lots of things that we can do to encourage ridership to come back. But in the, let's call it like the near term, transit agencies face this paradox that Lawrence was kind of, that he was kind of getting into, which is we need customers to come back, and they will come back. And many of the people who are riding transit are the ones who are already the most vulnerable, who have essential jobs, et cetera. But as people come back, we'll probably have more people than we can accommodate under COVID social distancing. And yeah, so face masks will become a norm. They are required now on SEPTA, and we are definitely trying to change our communications as well to basically say that social distancing cannot be maintained in the long term on transit, and that the success has been seen in France and in Japan from just wearing masks and also reducing talking on transit vehicles. But yeah, we don't see it coming back to 100%. And in the near term, it will paradoxically be a problem as well as a benefit, or as well as something that we really are eager to see. We're eager to see ridership return, but it will also be a problem if we think about the possibility of transmission.
Mm-hmm. That's a great segue into the next question, which is sort of based on Lawrence's Recover and Reimagine comment. That service will come back, but it will not look the same as it did before. So, what are any of the other panelists using COVID as an opportunity to reimagine their systems and how they operate? And I guess it would be, probably in a post-COVID world, right? Is what I imagine this question is really speaking to.
So there's definite markets that I'm willing to lose transit market share to, like bike share, for example, and having better walking and cycling networks in our city is in the long term is a benefit. And if we lose transit riders because they're on bike share, we know we're going to gain them back in other times of the day where they might not be cycling, or the trip doesn't work for cycling. The one question I've always been asking people is, how comfortable are people going to be getting back into a rideshare vehicle when you don't know how well a rideshare vehicle driver is cleaning their cars? Whereas as transit, we have a responsibility to make sure that everything is sparkling clean. So that's kind of, I think, part of the reimagining is, I think, is also messaging transit is still going to be a very safe way to travel. We're also kind of bringing up, like, Toronto was very heavily hit by SARS in 2003. And we saw a huge drop in ridership in the immediate aftermath of SARS. But our fastest growing ridership years were right after SARS. And that's the main thing, is because we invested into the service. We, implemented things like expanded periods of service. So there's service all the time, all day, every day. A 10-minute network has been done over the past 10 years. These are the things that have really driven ridership to come back, despite of anything else that's happened, because we're offering a good product. So definitely, I encourage all of our transit agency partners and friends across North America to try new things.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else? Okay, cool. Yeah. Simone or Kate, you don't have to answer it. Grant, you've answered everything. Just like with you. But that's actually, one of the things that all of you have mentioned, and I'm glad someone in the audience brought this up, is the enhanced or increased or different communication techniques that you all are using in your various agencies. So, one of the questions is, with that enhanced communication or different communication, how are you connecting with difficult to reach communities, including people with disabilities, older adults, people with limited English proficiency, on and on and on. As it's really funny, as the director of marketing and community outreach, I literally, this is a question that I ask myself too, is how can I reach into the pockets of places that are not part of our, our social channels, right? Who are not part of a social bubble, or a traditional communication or marketing channels, right? So what are you guys doing to sort of reach and do the deep dive into communities that, may not be in your social mix because they may not have access to internet? You know what I'm saying? As an example. Let's start with Simone. I'm curious, and I'm only asking, I'm curious to hear what all of you think about this particular question, because I think that's super important for us to be reaching folks that we don't traditionally get to.
Yes, that's very interesting. We are actually working on just updating our website, letting those riders know who are interested in paratransit, in our New Freedom program, the fixed route service, what we have available. We want to make sure that, of course, safety is always practiced first. And going back to what you were talking about as far as like reimagining or re-imaging or coming up with different techniques to better serve the community. We want to make sure that we add a feature on mobile phones. So a lot of people have cell phones. So they're able to access rides via cell phones. We want to make sure that we just keep those lines of communication available and open to everyone who is using public transportation or paratransit service. So the main platform that we have would be on the website. We also have on our switchboard different things that we're updating the riders about as far as extending certification. Again, going back to the no fares. So if you don't have access to a smartphone or the internet, then you can always call in to hear a recording about, different updates that we have on the system, a traditional way of getting information. There have been some talks about mail outs, different things with our marketing department to send out to consumers just to make them aware of different things that are planning to be implemented in the future.
Awesome. Kate.
Yeah, I was just unmuting. Thanks. So some stuff that we're doing to reach riders who may not be using the internet or have access to the internet, we're using the car cards on our vehicles to display information about the changes happening right now, head signs, and the panels on our shelters as well. Just really low tech stuff of like meeting our riders where they are. We've also really tried to improve our relationships with service organizations that populations, particularly people with different types of disabilities, are accessing these organizations for services. If we have relationships with them, then we can help use them or like work through them to get information out to those riders. And we do things, I think the phone, a phone number, a hotline, works. And we also just make calls to the folks who we know, like the people who, show up to our meetings and want to know, and we know that they may not be online, just pick up the phone and give them a call. Because we do have a really large population in Baltimore that doesn't have access to the internet. It is a really big concern for us. So not to say that we're hitting everybody and, succeeding to the extent that we would like to, but that's some of the things we're doing.
Cool. And Grant?
This is really an interesting question. I think we have a lot of emphasis on communications over the internet. So like one thing is that we're doing as a response to COVID, not just to disseminate information, but to seek information from our customers, is to put out surveys. And so we're putting out a survey to customers, putting out a separate survey to employers, and stakeholders.
I'm sorry, how are those being delivered, the surveys?
They're, SurveyMonkey or online forms. That is the rub. That's the problem. For populations that don't have access to the internet or that are ESL, the one way that I know that we have a precedent right now is with our work with the SEPTA key. So our fare payment system, which has been transitioning over the last several years. So we have consultants who are basically community outreach coordinators and consultants who've been communicating about SEPTA key to especially English as a second language communities and elderly communities or other communities that don't have access to the internet. I think that we're going to see a lot more use of those kind of very like area specific, hyper nuanced community outreach type channels. So getting our message through community leaders and through community organizations that has been pretty successful with SEPTA key. Could definitely use some beefing up, but I think that's what we'll see going forward. I don't have any exact examples besides what Kate said of just signage, having signage, having decals, having notices where people access transit is the most effective way, but it's only for those people who are actively using transit, right? So they have to be near some of our infrastructure to see it. And as we, if the survey is any indication, the survey from this event, there's a lot of people who stopped taking transit around March and they haven't gone back, so they may not be able to get updates. So it's a difficult problem, and it deserves a lot of attention.
It is, and I think it's across the board. Laurence, I want to get your answer, but yeah, we it's the same experience with us here, right, at MoGo, right? It's one of the things that I love to do was to convene community meetings, or to go and attend Black clubs, to go in Black club meetings, to go to I've literally gone to the police stations here, which convene some community meetings sometimes, and talked about preach the gospel of MoGo, and in COVID, all those things are gone. And then so you think of other gathering places where people might be, but then it's people are not gathering there. So Laurence, tell us how you address this particular challenge.
So I guess definitely we're signage, all that stuff I think is absolutely key, and we've done a really good job posting notices at every subway station. But then we also have to note that most of our riders are on buses right now. So how do you go out to the point of buses? So we have a pre-existing systems at all of our bus garages that have closed circuit TV that kind of has the most recent messages that come out and that operators can see every single day. And we hope that they can be good ambassadors for us out on the system. Another thing that's been happening over the past couple of weeks is that we've redeployed a lot of the back of house staff that might not have a full plate on their schedules right now, that we've been redeploying them onto the system. So we've called them the COVID ambassadors, and for example, a couple of my colleagues are out at subway stations a couple of days a week to inform customers, to hand out masks, to assist with any questions that they have, just to increase that face-to-face. And that, I think, does two things. It keeps our customers informed, but it also hopefully builds trust in the system, that if our employees are comfortable being in the same space as everybody else, I think that'll be a key one as well. So right now we're not doing it on vehicles because obviously you don't want to be taking up spot on vehicles, but I think the next step is to go out to the busy surface stops and engage with our customers that way, because we know it's good we have those statistics that we know where people are.
Excellent, cool. So I have just a couple more questions. A friend of mine here in Detroit actually asked this, which is great. So his question is, really after the recession in 2008, ridership reached its highest levels in the US since the 50s. And part of the reason why is perhaps that people could no longer afford private car ownership. So if we happen to see a similar situation happen post-COVID, People have been out of work. The economy we know is in the tank still, even though it seems like it's slowly recovering. But, the economic impact of COVID has been far reaching. So with that being said, if we see these sort of like a surge of ridership, if people feel comfortable enough to do so, how can you all manage that increased demand, especially considering shrinking city budgets and new safety measures that limit capacity on buses? Is it just about increased, routes, or I'm sorry, not increased routes, but frequency of buses? Like what do you guys think about that and addressing that? And it can be any one of you.
Like, one thought I have is just that I think there's a lot of work going on right now, certainly at MTA and around the country and around the world, in figuring out how to make sure that our transit vehicles are safe and can operate at capacity. So, we moved to rear door boarding. I don't think we expect that to be a permanent solution. We are, people have different systems for decals on seats and spacing people out and stuff. But, our transit vehicles, we've got to be able to haul some people in them for them to really do their job and keep working. So I think that we're going to see more, low tech and high tech solutions for ventilation and, sneeze guards and protecting our operators and all this stuff that will let us, safely carry the volume of people that we need to. So I think that's an important part of it. And then the other thing that I think a couple of people have mentioned, that we're all going to keep working on, and is, we're all, always tweaking our schedules and trying to make them more efficient, but just deploying the service in the right place at the right time, like using the technology that we have to know, with, just so much more detail about what loads we're carrying on what routes at what time and when those shift changes are, and making sure that we're deploying our resources, as effectively as possible. I think that's going to be even more important as we're trying to stretch tight budgets and, carry, hopefully increasing loads.
Right, yeah, that would be a great problem to have, right? Lawrence or Grant, any quick thoughts on this from you?
Similar comments to what Kate said. Having that data and being able to respond, I think, is going to be the way we have success. But then, going back to what I said before, like working to work with the city to increase bike share to our subway stations, for example, because our buses are fullest as they get closest to the subway. And if we can get most of those people who are close to the subway station to walk or cycle instead, we've now created this capacity for the people who are riding longer distances, and shifting the way people think about transit, that you don't take transit for 1 or 2 stops unless you absolutely, you aren't able to walk those distances, but leave those for the longer journey trips that, a lot of people have to be on.
Right. Awesome. Well, go ahead, Grant.
I'll just throw in one more thought to kind of turn around the question a little bit. And yeah, I think putting more vehicles and service out is just probably not going to happen in the sense of buying additional vehicles, hiring additional operators. That's probably just not going to happen. But we can find ways of being more efficient with how we use it, with how we use transit. And that's what Kate was saying, is getting more people on board safely. And the other one that at least in my office in SEPTA, we're very passionate about is the idea of making the service itself less peaked. So making weekday service look more like all-day service, and instead of chasing ridership and making our service have more and more during the peak, working with employers, working with the public to understand that we have lots of capacity if people take it at different times of the day. And that is going to be really interesting to see whether COVID creates a lasting disruption in when people travel, and whether there are staggered shifts, and whether the 9 to 5, at least for those people who work in offices, whether the 9 to 5 is truly dead, or whether it will come back. And why do we need to all arrive at our destinations at exactly the same time and depart at exactly the same time? We can make incredible use of the resources we already have if there's a little bit more interplay between demand and supply.
Right. Great answers, everyone. I have one final question before I turn it back over to Mickey for our conclusion. But and that is just generally speaking. What do you see next? What's next in the way of mass transit? And I would imagine that in the terms of COVID, but it doesn't necessarily have to be related to COVID. But what do you see in the future? Start with Laurence.
Oh, I wanted to think about that one. I just really want to create the conditions that people are comfortable to be back on transit as soon as we can, and whatever we can do to build that confidence in people. Like, we're lucky in Toronto that we're a very transit dependent city from a North American standpoint. So I know that there are people that are going to come back. But definitely, I think we undersell the importance of branding and marketing, but I think that will have a big part in the recovery of transit, and hopefully we get it back into everybody's day-to-day lives.
Grant?
So I'll use this as an opportunity to throw in a couple things that are a little bit more out there, a little more wild card. There is discussion within SEPTA and in the industry at large about so what do we do with underused routes? What do we do with or differently demanded service? So if it's a bus service, kind of like Laurence was talking about at the very beginning, with buses, you can just reallocate the vehicles and you can boost service on other things. But if it's rail, you're not going to pull up the rails and all of a sudden that means that you can deploy more buses. So there is a conversation going on, and that's just starting right now, or just being revived right now, about what do we do with commuter rail. And I think just today or just yesterday, Transit Matters, which is a nonprofit, they're working with MBTA in Boston to look at what would it take to reconfigure their commuter rail to be more like a frequent service rail. So every 15, 30 minutes. There is some interest in that at SEPTA. I can't say that that's actually going anywhere, but it's the idea of, can something that is a traditionally more commuter oriented, that's traditionally higher fares, that's traditionally more spoken, hub and wheel, be rethought of as a transit-like service. And then the other thing is paratransit, especially in our outer lying service. If we see reduction in demand in our outer lying service, how can we make paratransit vehicles work as first mile, last mile service, and integrate it with our bus service? That's we've been talking about that for a long time. I don't know how likely it is, but it's just another idea of taking something that we already have, assets that we already have, these vehicles, and rethinking what those vehicles can do for non-fixed route service. Okay, sorry, I was on mute for a second. I'll just repeat what I said at the beginning. I think going forward, what we'll be doing is we'll have to be as flexible as possible. And yeah, that kind of certainty in many ways, in the good kind of certainty that comes with being a transit agency, and the bad kind of stagnation of certainty of we know what the status quo is, all of that's going out the window. And I think that's changes the new normal.
Right. Is Simone still here? I think she might have. Simone, you still here? Okay, well, let's go to Kate.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what Lawrence and Grant have said. I think that the communication with our riders and, you know, whether it's marketing or communication, depending on how you look at it, just making people believe that transit is safe is going to be really important to our ability to get back up and running something similar to normal. I'm hopeful that the recognition that transit is essential to our economy and to essential workers in our economy is something that will stick around in people's head and turn into stronger support for transit going forward, even if ridership remains low. And I hope that that turns into dollars for transit, of course, but also things like dedicated lanes, right-of-way, priority, so that we're able to operate more efficiently. So we'll certainly be pushing for those things. And yeah, I don't think any of us really know. So learning to be adaptable is I don't know, the name of the game, I guess. That's what we need to do right now.
And I could not agree with you more that, you know, it's really being able to pivot and adapt in an ever-changing environment that will hopefully lead to success for all of us. Thank you all so much, panelists, for participating. Thank you, audience members. I'm going to turn it over to Mickey. And that'll be that. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Adriel, thank you so much for moderating. Lawrence, Grant, Simone, and Kate, thank you so very, very much. As well as the attendees, we're glad you all joined us today. There is a survey we would like for you all to take if you can. The link is in the chat. Hopefully we can keep these conversations going. So if you don't mind, if you want to drop your email in case people have questions, if y'all don't mind doing that, that will be helpful as well. If you do mind, just act like you didn't hear me. And that's all we have for y'all today. So thank you. We'll leave it open for a couple more seconds just to get those emails in there. And that is all. I'm glad you all joined us today, and y'all have a great week. Stay healthy and be well.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.